Hindsight and time are magical. Time can heal wounds and it can make certain things age, either for the better or for the worse. Hindsight, on the other hand, provides you with an entirely new perspective you never thought possible, and at times, it can open up an entire new world of possibilities, while also taking you back in time and help you appreciate things better. In gaming, hindsight is a double-edged sword. The gaming industry is one that is always moving forward, and it's always in such a rush that true gems not only get overlooked, but also get harshly criticized and left behind due to either a messy launch, a misconception, or poor criticism, giving birth to cult classics that should have been more successful in hindsight. Mirror's Edge is a great example of this. It was originally made from the scrap mechanics that were going to be implemented into the Battlefield series and became its own brand new IP, at a time when EA had nothing but sports games and online-only Battlefield games under their belt. It was an attempt to compete with the Uncharted's and the Gears of War of the 7th generation of consoles, but low sales and a learning curve led to the game being left behind right as the military shooter genre started peaking. But in spite of this, the game gained a cult following and even got a prequel release a few years later to a rather lukewarm reception. One that I am starting to feel is gonna get the same treatment as its predecessor, but right now, we are here to talk about the original game and see how time has treated it. In Mirror's Edge, we play as Faith, a young messenger delivering underground packages and information through the City of Glass, a dystopic city where freedoms have been suppressed, everything has been sterilized, and everything is so controlled that you rarely see people outside. We start her story as she just recovered from a nasty unspecified accident that put her out of commission for months. Things seem to be going back to his usual dystopic routine until she gets a call from her sister, and before she realizes it, she stumbles upon a nasty political plot, and now she has to fight to save her sister from becoming the scapegoat of said plot. Compared to the many games with apocalyptic stakes, chosen ones and do-or-die situations, coming back to a smaller plot like this is rather refreshing. The stakes in this game are smaller and personal in spite of something major happening in the city, and I like that. There is a sense of realism to a tale like this, and it makes a lot more sense given the core gameplay. This is all bigger than our protagonist is, and it helps make this experience a lot more grounded, more human. The gameplay in Mirror's Edge, going by what I looked up for the sake of this review, is the first of its kind. Parkour is actually not that new in games. It's been going on as early as the late 6th generation, but Mirror's Edge is where the first-person parkour style came out, and if it didn't, then it's the one that started to popularize it. In general, you have to go from point A to point B. The City of Glass is a major playground for you to move around with, and it's all designed in a way that you are not really having your hand held. The main challenge in the gameplay lies in going through all the obstacles without dying, finding the right route along the way, and being super careful with the parkour. There are two major deadly obstacles in these levels, the main one being gravity, and in the case of a few other levels, police officers. After all, you are playing as a messenger that is delivering information that is not being controlled or approved by the government. But from the two, gravity is by far the most dangerous. Since you are moving through skyscrapers and you have to jump from building to building, you have to run at the right speed or move through the right places. Otherwise, gravity will send you plummeting to a very implied squishy death as you splat into the pavement. Now, when I say it's a challenge to go through each level, I do mean it. One of the things that gave this game a false negative first impression was the learning curve. It goes without saying, but first-person platforming is tricky to pull off, let alone doing it in an entire first-person parkour system, so deaths and frustration are bound to happen, and trust me, I did rage quit this game twice. Once I looked up online the reality of the runner vision, I started to loosen up on how I did things, and then suddenly something clicked for me. See, the core of the parkour system here is based on physics, or rather, momentum. Look up any video of parkour and you're going to notice that every performer is in constant movement. Their most insane stunts have them gaining momentum, and it is that momentum that allows them to defy gravity. The same kind of logic applies here. If you have Faith moving slowly or take pauses to look around and jump, she's going to move a lot slower, take longer to climb up obstacles, and in the more frustrating cases, she will not land her jumps. But if you go out of your way to run, keep moving, and time your jumps and slides correctly, then suddenly the levels become a lot faster and smoother to move through. There is even a point where you might even start ignoring runner vision. I came to learn that runner vision is mostly a way to offer you options on how to move. I don't blame anyone who assumes it exists as a pointer towards your next objective, but you soon learn that is not the case when runner vision leads you into dead ends or straight up death traps. But why ignore or disable runner vision altogether? Because what I realized is that true to parkour, the entire environment is your playground. You can find speedruns in this game using parts of buildings you couldn't even consider going through. Even if it meant falling to my death a lot, experimenting with my own routes through exploration made every aspect of this game a lot more fun, and it made even more sense. This also made the combat click a lot better and feel a bit less frustrating, because for better or worse, the combat is by far the most inconsistent element of the game, maybe even more so than the momentum or the gravity. The first few times I played this, I thought it was ridiculous that an entire army of heavily armed men will want to gun down a single parkour messenger, but after getting to understand the story better, it made a lot more sense. What makes not so much sense, however, is turning the combat into more of an action sequence rather than, well, a straight up brawler. Most enemies will be armed with guns, something Fade doesn't have until she picks them up from down enemies, so figuring out a way to knock them out before they fill you with more holes than SpongeBob becomes a puzzle in itself, which kinda reminds me of a more modernized version of Dragon's Lair. I gotta commend any player who completed any of these combat sequences without ever picking up a gun and blasting every last one of these enemies in their faces. The console version had an achievement for finishing the game non-lethally, and plot-wise Fade is supposed to hate guns, which is commendable, but given the life-or-death situations in the combat segments, it kinda prevents me from taking the pacifist ideal seriously after I get gunned down for the billionth time. Now, remember I said the combat is inconsistent? That's because no matter what you do, your strategy will never work twice in the same sequence. You can take down the first guy, use his gun to take down everyone else in one attempt, but then on the next one, you will mistime the takedown and you will be taken down in the most pathetic way possible. It's a good thing I was playing this on normal difficulty. As much as this game grew on me in retrospective, I don't see myself taking up the challenge of going through these playgrounds while running the risk of getting one-shotted. I'm guessing this is what made people wish Fade was closer to your average FPS protagonist, but for me, I am glad she's not this. Because like I said earlier in the video, Fade is not a super soldier, she's not a chosen one, and anyone who felt disappointed about how the conflict in this game ends will realize in retrospective that this was exactly the point. Fade is a humble messenger. She is in charge of delivering messages underground without the filters or censorship of the government. In a different game, she is the intel team bringing in the objectives for the better armed characters so they can go out and save the day. This makes the city itself into one of the more terrifying monsters in gaming. It's refreshing because this is more of a fight of the little guy, or in this case girl, against a major conspiracy trying to use her and her sister as pawns for a nefarious cause. I said this story is a lot more human because that's usually how real life goes. You can do your best and life can still deal you a bad hand. You can try to just do your part in the larger scheme of things, but said schemes only show us how small of a blip we really are in this big scary world. So in circumstances like this, the plight of someone like Fade makes her a lot more sympathetic. It's the little victories that make the difference for every one of us. Even when the game starts to go into its more typical action tropes, Fade is still no bigger than the overall conflict of the city, which is something I seriously appreciate. I enjoy my games where I am an overpowered chosen one that can single-handedly turn the tide of a conflict in countless genres, but I am also of the firm belief that there is plenty of room for games like this. It adds some much needed variety to an industry and hobby that honestly has no reason to restrict itself so much. I would love to talk more about this game into more depth, but if I do, I will be entering into spoiler territory for both gameplay and story, so instead I will encourage any of you to play it, and if you already did and it didn't impress you the first time, then give it another chance. Look up speedruns of movement guides, then start experimenting with the game by yourself. You will come to love it, and the sense of mastery will feel extremely satisfying. Just to give you an idea of how satisfying this whole game gets when you get good at it, I wanted to record some extra gameplay for the sake of this review, even ended up trying out the extra race and speedrun modes. The former is a set of mini time trials to set tracks, and the latter is playing through the main story chapters as fast as possible. Well, I went on to play for a few minutes of the first level just to try it out, and ended up playing for about an hour. And every single time, I learned my best route and shed more seconds. I am far from a great player and I am nowhere near as fast as some of the crazier speedrunners out there, but that I stuck to this level until I got it right felt extremely good. I also have to take a moment to appreciate that this game has a cutscene viewer. I know it's a nut thing to talk about and many don't think too highly of this game's plot, but just the fact that you can go back and look at any cutscene you want is just awesome. Especially because if you decide to replay any of the main story chapters, they skip the cutscenes altogether and each chapter is treated as its own separate thing. Better yet, you can even choose a specific checkpoint for each level so you can replay whatever section you liked without having to go through the whole thing. It's giving the player options, and any game that does this will always get a thumbs up from me, because all these features that make it easier to enjoy and replay the game have become a sad rarity. Even games that you would expect to have something as basic as manual saving or multiple save files spent a good part of the past 2 generations of consoles isolated to a single save file. So again, a game like this seriously deserved a lot more recognition. Because once all the pieces fall into place and you start to really sink deeper into the mechanics, the entire experience becomes seriously satisfying. And because of that satisfaction and everything else mentioned in this review is why I am giving Mirror's Edge a nearly perfect 9 out of 10. This game and this IP deserve a lot more love than it did, and it really didn't deserve to get buried in the boom of the military shooters. But at the very least, I appreciate how it influenced the rest of the industry over the years. With the news that EA is remaking Dead Space at the time of this recording, I can only dream of them ever remaking or remastering this one. Who knows, at this point in life anything can happen. This game also has reignited in me a love for games and genres that are more about the little victories and more personal types of stories. I want to find more games like this, and I want games like this to get more played rather than just well known. Because as an old TV show used to say, there is a million stories in a big city, and in my own humble opinion, you never know what kind of gems you can uncover.